So welcome. Today our focus is going to be on the project. We've all been working pretty tirelessly on getting everything up and running, and there's going to be tweaks and stuff over the next couple of days. There's some things in the front end that I kind of want to look into and just make sure everything's kind of like a bit nicer, maybe like visually. You'll probably notice if you actually run it, it does look a bit different and stuff like that. These differences again aren't going to have to be merged or anything like that, and they're quite nice. I can show you an image here of what it looks like. So you can see like the inventory looks a bit nicer and the buildable menu and stuff is a bit nicer. Just everything's kind of has a bit of place for everything. And there's a couple more animations and just like general stuff like that. I mean, just generally, I think this looks nice. I mean, look how much better this floor looks. And so you'll probably see small things like this over, I would probably say at most by the end of this week, Saturday, Sunday. But like one of the things we are going to be doing is going to kind of be hosting some sort of ability for you to vote on actual product changes. So you can be like, hey, I really want this to be added to the front end. And it's probably because you want to do something with it in the back end. And we may be looking into adding stuff like that. There's a few restrictions that we may be looking at, but that's more for milestone 3. But we do kind of want to get that kind of feedback from you guys early, so that stuff will probably even be part of this. Is probably going to be that, just so we can kind of start getting that feedback early and start getting those ideas early, so that we can start looking at allocating time to build them and stuff like that. Since pretty much the entire front end was written by me, it means I'm probably going to be making a lot of the changes to it. Since I've got the most context around it. It's not a particularly well made front end. It's actually pretty nice. It's pretty well structured, but it's not like it's still reasonably somewhat hacky. And so I'm very limited in time, as probably any of my students in my classes know. Yeah, I've worked a lot, and so for me, I've got to make sure I plan things probably 3 or 4 weeks ahead. And so in cases like this, that's kind of what we're looking at. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to begin by kind of going through the setup instructions, making sure that that's all very clear and kind of concise. And then once we've got that going, we're actually going to make a small change to the front end and just kind of show you how you can build a map. So we're actually just going to build a very simple map. We're actually going to build this example that you can see here. And this will take us a couple of minutes at most. And so what you'll be able to see is you'll be like, oh, wow, I can actually render this stuff very easily. And so what you can do is you can actually find out that one of the coolest things kind of about this project is you can make it very reactive. So as soon as you do like a backend change, it almost is immediately shown in the front end. It's kind of the way it's been designed. So it typically results in a pretty nice experience. There's some things like battle and stuff like that most likely a lot of you won't really get to making it look nice and rendering nice until a bit later on. And that kind of stuff, we're going to kind of release some more information about that very, very soon, about kind of how to do these more complicated animation systems. We have slight restructuring of the specification here. You can see that reference for all the graphics and stuff is in its own section now. I mean, this probably shouldn't have 9.22 anymore. Anyway, and this is kind of a bit vague, right? And the intention was to kind of get you guys to figure it out, but I think we should actually specify a bit more. So you'll probably see some examples and some actual like, okay, here's an example of like a battle log. And like you can see like on the right hand side, you get some text that pops down, because like this stuff can even spawn text and stuff like that, even though that's not specified here. There's like these small changes that we're making, and all of these changes kind of will come as people need them, right? So for example, one of the, as I said, with milestone 3, so if you're expecting that you need some changes, we can be looking into kind of providing maybe some degree of support for that. Though some of it will be just like you kind of have to do what was given to you, right? But if it's something like, for example, you want the ability to swap languages, I mean, that's something that we can look into, stuff like that. Okay. And typically it won't be for a specific person or a specific group. It'll be for a group of groups that also want it. So it's going to be a bit of a consensus-driven approach. So we have the project here, and your project repo will hopefully look something like this at the beginning. This is pretty much exactly what it'll look like. And what you'll see is I mean, I can clear that. Just clear so you don't have to see that. That's just what we're going to be doing over the next couple of minutes. And you can see there's a bunch of files here. This pretty much looks like the assignment. In terms of the structure, you've got a bunch of response objects and this kind of weird wrapper object that exists, and this is generics, and oh my god, I don't know what this is. It's okay, don't worry about it, right? This is all handled for you. You'd basically never have to use this class, maybe until milestone 3, where if we decide to add extra APIs and stuff like that, that you'll probably finding that you'll be using this. But it's actually really, really easy to use. And if you look inside the app, you can see that pretty much the only way it's used is just by doing this. And you can see it automatically wraps it. So like this returns dungeon response, and this object automatically goes, oh, okay, sure, I'll just return it as a generic response wrapper. So this function here actually automatically like creates the object. So pretty much it's kind of magical with how it works. It's really cool. A lot of this was kind of trying to figure out how do we build framework that's easy for students to understand and is structured and it's kind of clear and stuff like that. And I think we've done that pretty well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to run it. That's it. Just press the run button. You've downloaded everything. You've checked the project is fine. Everything's good. Press the run button and we should see it load. Now, there's a few secrets that are going on behind the scenes here. And by the way, you can click to make the animations finish on that starting page because it's really annoying to wait every time. And like, I know the font looks a bit weird here. Like you may see this stuff like move up a bit vertically and like slightly maybe have a bit more of a different color to it. So it like blends in a little bit less. It's kind of hard, a lot of this stuff, because I don't really want to go UI design crazy. Like the point of it is not to have like this beautifully designed product, but you do want to make it like somewhat nice. And so if we actually look at this, we actually see, okay, how the hell does this render? Because, previously we had this dist folder, but there's no dist folder here. And like, oh my God, what the hell is this structure? Like there's all this stuff. There's a resource with all these images. And look how, geez, look how many images there are. And by the way, I had to cut these one by one manually. I mean, I had tools that automatically splice them, but all the naming had to be done completely manually, which is one of the reasons why like a lot of these files aren't named. I basically just named like the ones that most people will be using. And then the rest, I'm like, if you want to use them, you can name them. Yeah, I do not recommend. It's actually probably, it's one of the reasons why tile sets are so useful these days, because what you do is you just have like a big image that contains all your tiles, and you don't have to like separately identify each image. You can just like kind of slice them up and then give them names within the tile set. Most systems have that. That was too much work for us to implement, so we didn't implement a tile set kind of system, and we just kind of had individual images. Anyway, so if I look at this kind of structure here, it's kind of scary to me, right? I've got main, I've got test, I've got resources, I've got Java, I've got what the heck? And this is what we actually call a standard Java structure. We've actually never done this before in this course because we're not really a Java course. But I was like, you know what? It's a really useful thing to teach people about structure. We've had problems with structure in the past. And I actually think it's beneficial in terms of stability. And so we're going to kind of follow this structure. Not necessarily for labs onwards, because labs, they're like just kind of demonstrations. We don't really need this kind of inherent structure to it, but for things like the project and stuff like that. And who knows, like again, it's just like folder structure doesn't even matter. And so if we actually look at our build.gradle, this is kind of maybe where it starts to become a bit more clear. And you maybe have not seen one that's fast before, but I just kind of want to point out a few things out for you. And so you have this concept of main, and you have this concept of test, and it's actually a separation of resources. So what this means is the resources available to your test environment are different than the resources available to your application. Because if I'm running tests, I don't need images. And that's basically what it comes down to. And so that's where the separation occurs. But also, like, it allows you to separate files, so I don't have to compile my test with compiling my main code. And so I have a very simple test here that I can run. And the test will pass. We give you a little bit of code to begin with. And the test will work and everything will be good and stuff like that. So how does this render? And the trick is through this app folder here. Now, this app folder is actually a bit of a lie, right? And so this is actually a backup. And so the point is, if you have no internet, it will use this. It will at least work, probably. It depends how many changes we make in the future, right? But as soon as you go have internet at all, it will download a newer one and we'll be using that newer one. And so it'll be fine from that point onwards, right? So obviously, like if you, I don't know, in the wilderness somewhere, and for the next 6 weeks you don't have internet access, you may need to figure something out. But I mean, you got to push your code somehow. So I think it's kind of this probably easy way for us to kind of presume that you have some access. And if you're really interested with how it works, it's actually kind of cool. I mean, it really isn't. It's very simple, but it's kind of cool from like a it's really that simple point of view. And all it does is it goes and downloads a zip that's hosted by us, and then this zip gets unzipped into the directory, and that's it. So it really is pretty simple. It looks like a whole lot of code just to download a zip and unzip it, because apparently that's a lot harder in Java than it should be. But really, yeah, you can click this and you could actually download the zip yourself. So if for some reason, if it's not working, legitimately, if it's not working, one of the things we'll be recommending is just download the zip and just copy the zip into the app folder, right? Or the contents of the zip. And then like you don't need internet. So if for some reason you know you're not gonna have internet for a little bit and you're like, I'm worried, you just download the zip, copy into your app folder, and you'll be fine. And so this is basically how we're going to be pushing updates. And so yes, this will download it every time, but it's like I think maybe 67 kilobytes. It's a very small package, so I think it's pretty reasonable for that to be downloaded every time. But if you do have bandwidth requirements, what you may want to do is you may actually want to disable this line so that you don't actually download it, or you'd have to probably disable all these lines. And the reason there is, for example, you really, really want to be careful of your bandwidth. And again, it's 67 kilobytes. It's very, very minor. And it will be cached, so it won't even download it each time, most likely. Well, it depends how. Actually, no, it probably will, because there probably won't be a caching at a file OS level. Anyway, and so what will happen is if you really kind of are worried, you can obviously disable that. Anyway, so that gets downloaded and then gets run. And we can see this here. And we have credits. Wow. We have quick game, load game, start new game, and all this UI will basically work. I mean, like, look at this. It's working, right? I mean, I can't select one. Yeah, that's actually funny. If you press cancel, it still tries to load that dungeon. That's a front-end bug that will be fixed by the time that you play with it, probably. I don't know. We'll see. I'll try to fix it tonight. But it should be fixed automatically, hopefully. I don't know. We'll see. Worst case, we may have to make it like a fix or two over the next day or two, but that stuff should be very transparent. I don't think there will be. We've done a bunch of testing around it, and it seems to be really, really good. So let's just create a map with boulders, and we will see it won't like us. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but basically it comes down to the fact you can see we have 522s. Oh, that's actually Ed. Can I open this up? Ed was having some funs before. You see that basically it's making these requests, and these requests are saying, well, I don't have an error, but I've got no data. And the system's going, well, I don't know what to do. You don't have an error, but you haven't given me a world to load. Like, I asked you to start a new game, you haven't given me anything. Like, come on, help me. And if we look at the code, we see why. So controller, new game. Oh, it's null. And so the point of this is, okay, let's try to render something. Right, that's the first step. But before we get there, let's actually just try to change something about the UI, because that's kind of a useful thing to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to change a little bit of text here, and you can follow this through. And I actually recommend after you watch the video, you actually sit down and follow this through. It'll take you like 5 minutes to follow it through, and it will honestly really help, because you'll kind of read it and use that other part of your brain. So if we go to source, resources, languages, we can actually change the text. So we can, for example, put my name here and say, I created this very badly written backend right now, right? That doesn't do anything. The starter code, right? And look, it gets auto-filled. Again, kind of hard to read, but it gets there. I mean, I could change the color. Oh, oops, let me turn that off. I could change the color if I want. Why not? Let's go black. And it's kind of hard to read. What's a nice color? Let's do maybe a little bit of red, a little bit of green, and some blue. And no blue. Yeah, yellow. That's a horrific color. But you kind of see what I'm saying. Like, you can literally put hex codes in here. This is just CSS, right? So hex codes, RGBA, anything you want. Like, you can do RGB in this. You can, you're really quite flexible. You can just like cyan, which is a beautiful color. Which is not a beautiful color. Holy cow, that's blinding. Maybe like a nice purple. I'm just going to be playing around with colors for 20 minutes. That is horrific. Like a magenta, maybe. You'd think it would be that hard to find like a mixture between like a slightly dark, somehow worse. Anyway, we're just going back to white. Maybe like a gray, actually. Like a light gray. No, apparently light gray is not a thing. Maybe it's like a one word or something. I don't know, it's fine. We won't worry about it. You know what? That works. It's not best, but it's better than white. Okay, I'm gonna keep it. Don't know why I did that for 4 minutes. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got a very simple UI change. Let's actually build something. So if we look into the game here, we'll see inside this dungeon main controller, we have this response object. And basically what I want to do here is something that's quite simple. I actually just want to build a sample world, and I'm not going to have any code that thinks about it in any way. I'm just literally going to hard code what the world is. It's not probably the way you should be, obviously writing your real code, but it's a great way to play around. So I need to give it a dungeon ID. Now, what's an ID? Now, ID is explained in the specification as a unique identifier. It's basically something that has to be completely unique just to this thing. So you may want to Google how to generate unique identifiers in Java, because you do want something completely unique for every entity. Some random ID. Why not? Entities. Okay, we'll come back to that. Inventory. Honestly, it says generate some inventory. So inside this is a bunch of item responses, which contains an item ID. So I can just say item 1, right? And this is going to be a bow. And then the other item could honestly be anything. It could be a sword. I could make it wood, right? Any entity. I can create my own entities, right? The system actually, what you'll find out, doesn't know what an entity is. We're telling it what an entity looks like, and that's all it knows. Now, buildables, I'll leave that as an exercise for the reader if you really want. But pretty much just an array of strings, which just maps to like the entity IDs. And then finally, you just have a goal state, which is just going to be empty string. Okay. So, and goals have to be like specified in a specific format, and that will be updated tonight. It's one of those things that's like, hey, okay, front end's not so important for Master 2, but it's still something that like a lot of people enjoy. So we're gonna like sprinkle things in over the short period of time, because a lot of these things may change as people want them to change. They may be like, oh, you know what? I would really like if the format could be like this. I'm like, okay, we can think about that, right? Like it's kind of, we're trying to make it so this is more like, we tried to do a bit of this assignment, but it didn't work so well, where it's kind of more collaborative, where we want you guys to kind of feel like you're part of this kind of software development experience and feel like you're part of a company that's developing a product, rather than feeling like you're just like a student doing an assignment, right? And so part of that is working with teams, and part of that is maybe hating other people for being slow, or going, oh, why won't they implement this feature that I really want? And there's always a reason. Whether or not it's a good reason is a different matter. And so that's really what it's going to come down to. Okay, we have an entity response object, and we're just going to put these entities, and this is a new array list of these objects. Now, if we mouse over this and we quick fix it, what we'll find now is we need to generate some entities. Now, I'm going to copy and paste the generate entities from here, because I don't really want to rewrite this like crazy for loop. It's not really crazy. It's a very simple for loop, but I don't know, carpal tunnel. And I'll go through and talk about what this does. Okay. Yeah, that's not how I want it to be formatted. Java, you tried. Okay, so what we have here is we have this concept of wars have to be, so every map has to be fully surrounded by wars. That's just typically how they get rendered. You don't really need to, but that's just what you'll find almost all maps are. It's like not to say that you can't, but it's to say like the bounds checking is kind of left up to you, and there's like no explicit width or height on any of the maps. So like that's kind of clunky. Like, how are you going to do bounds checking there? Like, it feels a bit ugly for you guys. Like, and so I would probably just recommend just in kind of having that assumption that all maps are going to be bounded by walls or impassable terrain, so you don't have to worry about error bounds checking. It just makes your life a whole lot simpler. But it's up to you. I don't know why it's not loving this position. Wait, and maybe it's just like happy now. Anyway, so then what we're going to do is we're basically going to generate a grid that looks like this, right? So these are our walls. This is our player. This is our door, right? And so if we do this, we just see that we're going through X and Y. So we're going through all these X's and all of these Y's, and we're only taking the extremes. So the zeros, down and up, and the extremes on the other side, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to generate walls on those tiles. Now, the last parameter here is called interactable. Basically, kind of talks about whether or not I can like interact with the object by clicking on it. But that's like a little bit more complicated. So, you know, there was documentation on how it works and stuff like that. But that's more for the interact function, more for mercenaries and stuff like that. So I wouldn't really worry about that right now. Just try to get a basic map rendered, and we can kind of look into that stuff later. Again, you know, there's going to be parts of this that aren't as well specified, because keep in mind, this is an entire like system that has been built for you, right? And there's a lot to that. And so there'll be parts of it where like there's literally no documentation that says how you're meant to do this. So just write a question and we'll very, very quickly write some up for you. And so that's one of the reasons why kind of organization is important here. And that's just, sadly, I think, I don't know, I don't want to say if it's fact of life, because I think it's more just like, in some ways, a sad state of our industry, but documentation is pretty poor. And a lot of time is because of being, you know, rushed. We had to rush to get some of the stuff out and stuff like that. And so you kind of lose that time that you would spend on development and kind of design and stuff like that. As I'm sure all of you will become towards the end of this. So let's just go and add some new players and stuff. Again, I'm just going to be lazy and add these two. You can kind of see what they are. I'm creating new entities here. I'm creating a player and I'm creating a door. Now, these positions I care about. So this is the X and the Y position, measured from the top left, just because it's convenient. And the other thing is this concept of like layering. Now, layering is very important, and layering's all around like, hey, how do I want objects to be positioned in terms of like slices? So if you have like, for example, 10 slices on top of each other, how do you want to represent those? And so, for example, you may want it so that coins go below players. So if players walk over coins, they physically walk over the top of them. And so that's what layers are for. Layers are quite clever in terms of what you can do. And you want to think about how you can use layers to decide, oh, can this object actually walk through this other object or can it not? You know, so there's actually a bunch of things that let you kind of skip a lot of kind of more complicated logic by kind of using this concept of layers. And that's basically it, actually. We're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop this. We're only going to run it again. And have my headphone fall down for the 1000th time. And it runs. I can start a new game. And it renders. Look at that. But there's a problem, isn't there? There's this ugly green tile. And also, if I press any arrow keys or anything, WSD, by the way, is the default move, which actually is nowhere specified anywhere. So 100% we're going to specify that. I'll specify that tonight. Again, you know, these systems are quite big and quite complicated. So it's hard to remember to specify every part of them. Let me specify some of that stuff tonight. I'm sure you wake up tomorrow, you'll kind of look at some of it and you're like, oh wow, there's a lot more kind of detail in some of this stuff. And please just like be like, this is stupid. Why is this not specified? I'm like, yes, you're correct. It is stupid. And I'll fix it. So there's a bunch of things here that you'll notice. First is the background looks quite fancy. I love the background here. Two, obviously the inventory's moved. You have this concept of save game, which won't do anything because, you know, there's no saving. I mean, I can show the network logs here. And yeah, in this case, it's actually just going to straight up give an error because my dungeon's not being loaded correctly, right? Almost entirely probably because I just press the save button, which tries to like load the dungeon in, right? And so it's gone, nope, I don't like you, and kind of being a bit cranky because of that. But yeah, hey, I mean, it works pretty well. I mean, at least it loads, and I mean, I'm sure I can even trigger some of, maybe I can trigger, I don't know if these events will work actually, because these events are probably going to be in the same situation. Clicking on like these items in the inventory will trigger like an event to say, hey, I want to use this item, which is interesting. Anyway, okay, so there's a few other things here that kind of are cool that we can do, which is to fix this kind of ugly square. So all we have to do is you have to go, okay, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a square, right? A door, sorry. My brain is very fractured today. We're trying to build a door. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure it knows what a door is. And so if we look under this kind of default file called skins, and again, the documentation kind of goes to this in much better detail. And if you look under this list here, what you'll see is that there's no door. So all we have to do is add one. Now, I'm going to show you where you can find it. I go images, tile set, and I can look everywhere. In this case, it's under walls wooden. Tile set, walls, wooden, door, locked, silver.png. Easy. And then I reload the page, and I'm going to have to like recreate the game because once you reload the page, it goes back to the beginning. And it does not appear. That's fun. Let's see. Images, tile set. Okay, that could actually mean that like I got the path wrong. Let's see. Wars. Oh, yeah, look at that. So see this error here where it says this requested route has not been mapped? That tells me that this path was wrong. I mistyped it. And that was completely accidental, but it's actually kind of educational. And so if I rename it to wooden rather than that, reload the game, go back in, bam, there it is. Right? And you know, for example, you have all this, you can like look at this stuff and yeah, see this uses item use events. Yeah. This is going to trigger item use events. Save game will actually trigger save game. So almost certainly the issue that we've seen before was just because of the fact that it was returning an invalid world state, right? So that's one of the things, like if you have certain things that aren't going to be working, you probably do want to kind of realize that you're going to have to reload the page a bit if you have like massive parts of your application that aren't going to be working and you're clicking those buttons, because like the kind of front end kind of expects them to work to some degree. Yeah. Now you may be wondering, why does this say like, for example, if I click this button here after reload the page because I did save game, which obviously, you know, it kind of goes, oh, I've saved a game, but to what? And so, what is going on here? Unless I've got the wrong app open. That could also be true because there's two apps. And that would be very funny if that was, yeah, I think that was literally it. I think I just had the wrong application open. I don't know. It's been a very long day for me. I've been up since like, I've been up for an extremely long period of time. Anyway, so the thing here, this is error thing, is that is error basically refers to like whether or not an exception was thrown. In this case, it just returned null, so there was no exception. So if your code is bugs, you'll actually pop up with a really nice exception for you saying, hey, this is the bug that you had. Go and fix this. And so I think typically you'll find that it's actually a pretty nice experience building this stuff. Maybe a bit nicer than the assignment, but still probably as nice as the assignment was, hopefully, if the assignment was nice. If the assignment was horrible, then it's nicer. Now, there's a few other things that you look at. For example, what the hell is this thing? Like, this looks crazy. This is a concept called tile set. This basically lets you randomize images based on some sort of weighting. You can do crazy animations with things. You can change resolutions. Oh, let's say you want everything to be, 4 times bigger. Sure, go ahead. Bang! I'm not gonna say it'll render well if you make everything 4 times bigger, right? Like the rendering has kind of been built for, it should be okay in some cases, but obviously, this stuff has been built and like the resolution of this stuff is kind of somewhat specific, but it's still pretty cool. I mean, I'm sure like this is, for example, something I would consider a bug and I'd probably fix, right? I actually kind of like the zoomed in perspective in some way. Anyway, so, but you could also like, for example, zoom it out and you'd probably see a similar issue where these kind of, not really, but like kind of some degree. I guess I'll look at fixing that kind of rendering here of these imagery, make them a bit better. Because they currently use the resolution of the current screen, but they probably shouldn't. They probably should just use like a constant resolution rather than kind of matching the resolution that you set your images to. Because otherwise it's going to make them really clunky, right? If they're going to scale with the screen resolution, it's because it's why. Like, why not just make them constant? And so that's probably what's going to happen. But honestly, I'm really happy with everything, and I'm pretty happy with how everything works. Like, the randomization of everything feels really good and stuff like that. So hopefully you have a lot of fun playing around with this and finding bugs, I'm sure. And it goes through how to generate coverage reports and how to look at coverage reports. As you can see the coverage report here, and stuff like that, and how to test. So I definitely recommend have a look through this. We've tried pretty hard to try to give you a lot more documentation this time and a lot more information, and we'll be improving it. Now, a lot of this stuff, especially with the front end, is going to be kind of experimental. So we're going to be giving you a lot of information and stuff like that. And the idea is that it's kind of up to you to find out how you're going to solve a problem. So your problem may be, hey, I want a log on this right-hand side that shows me, oh, I just was in a battle and I dealt 10 damage and they dealt 5 damage, then I dealt 10 damage, then they dealt 5 damage. How am I going to render that? And so that's kind of your decision. You go, okay, well, what can I use in this current system? Oh, okay, there's an animation component that lets me animate stuff. And part of the animation component lets me spawn text. Ah, okay, so what I could do is I could bind an animation that plays after battle finishes. And on the right hand side, it kind of will transition some text into appearing. Maybe via opacity, or maybe you do something a bit more fancy that makes it look like the text is being typed or whatever. And so that's a really cool kind of flexibility that you have in the system. And we'll be adding more options, and you'll probably see this list expand over time. And most likely what will happen is if we do significant changes, you'll see probably every maybe week we'll have an update, and we're like, here's all the changes we made last week, right? 10 people really wanted this feature, so we went and we implemented this feature. Anyway, in saying that, we can't really promise really anything. I definitely can't, because I'm very, very busy, and I work full time, have full time uni study, and this on top. So I'd have very, very limited time. So if for example, there's a bunch of features that we need to look into, as we kind of saw with the assignment towards the end of part 3, where I was like, I'll fix one of these bugs, but these other bugs, it's kind of very personal and how you implement it anyway. So it's not really something that was interesting to fix. And so there may be situations like this where bugs in the front end is different, but like maybe situations where people are like, oh, I really want this feature to have like, I don't know, some random thing, like animations be cached or something, so you can kind of more easily use them. I'm like, yeah, that's a cool feature, but it's not something that we kind of have time for, maybe. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. Now, it's wonderful to have you all, and I will see you all later. Bye.